All right. First rule of this channel: we not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel: this is not legal advice. So this is going to be after waivers for week 9. This is going to be the proactive waiver wire show. So in this case, and this is me being dirty and getting this done like right before I went live. Uh, let's see, getting cute and chasing those vacated opportunities. That's what I talked about first with the Texans. So Nico Collins, he goes down with that concussion. We know there's going to be vacated opportunities, and again, like how we get cute. Generally speaking, vacated opportunities in the passing game tend to go to running backs first because that's just how like football is designed. Like if a guy isn't in the spot that he's supposed to be, the quarterback will tend to check it down. That's why it goes to running backs. Second is going to be tight ends, and again, this is going to be like with quarterbacks, they tend to go to their security blankets. Those are going to be the guys that will be in the middle of the field, running usually, not those higher production routes, in the middle of the field. Those are going to be the tight ends. That's why it usually goes that way. So then after that, it's usually like slot receivers, and then you're going to get like your outside, more productivity routes on the outside. So again, Nico Collins goes down, primarily plays the X, the big X in breaking routes. That's kind of what he does. And then the Texans have like a 1-to-1 replacement when it comes to like Xavier Hutchinson playing the role that Nico Collins plays. That's this kind of just how he functions. And he goes like 71% snaps in that offense. And then next you have like Jaden Higgins. He comes in, he's the rookie. He goes all the way up to 83% snaps. He gets a touchdown catch, and Xavier Hutchinson gets a touchdown catch. And Jalen Knoll, the other rookie that I do really like him, he goes from 43% snaps down to 39% snaps. This was kind of not a close game when it comes to the 49ers. He goes 6 for 5 for 63. 40-degree day, I would say, from Jalen Knoll. And then you get the touchdowns from Jaden Higgins. He gives you a 40-degree day. And Xavier Hutchinson, probably the closest thing to an over 40-degree day that you get out of these three guys. Now, I probably would have first bet on Dalton Schultz. And again, I have Nico Collins. I was trying to figure out how to deal with this problem. Went after Dalton Schultz first. Probably would have upgraded Woody Marks. And that's why I have like Drake London down here with that surprise scratch with that hip. It pops up in the injury report on Friday. Then he's like a game time. Could have rolled one of the Texans. Did not. The expectation with the Falcons was, again, vacant targets tend to go to running backs first. I actually watched Bijan get adjusted in the ESPN league that I'm in. His overall projection went up. Again, vacant targets tend to go to running backs, and that didn't happen, obviously, in that game. The guy that did get the vacant targets, the upgrade, was Kyle Pitts. That was an ugly game. But again, that's how getting cute generally works. So if we can kind of guess that one, and that's why I have like this one right here with like your Troy Franklins. Did see some of the waiver wire ads. I'll talk a little bit more about him later. Should have already been picked up and should have already been getting cute against that Cowboys defense. And then Bob's your uncle. There you go, and you get that like massive spike week. So that's how it works. The other thing is, if we're talking about like you're chasing the dragon on this one, Tyrone Tracy, Cam Scatterboot goes down, dislocated ankle. He goes on IR. Tyrone Tracy fills in 63% snaps. Remember, he is probably only going to be an RB2, and he's probably not going to be attached to necessarily a good offense. Doesn't mean that the Giants are going to be bad on offense. It just means like you're probably not going to get like design receiving work. He is going to lose out on a certain amount of trustworthy work to Devin Singletary. That's just how it's going to work. I don't know how much you're going to get a certain amount of red zone work, and in particular, Cam Scatterboot was scoring on receiving touchdowns. So again, that's kind of what you get with all that stuff. Like I will be putting in a massive fab bid in my main money league. He's already picked up in the high school league. He's already been picked up. That's just how that league rolls. Like guys will draft that guy and then just not drop them. But in my high school league, he is available after being dropped. I would probably bet in the ballpark, depending of your league, somewhere between the boat and a lot. Just kind of know there's no point on telling you what you should be bidding in your fab leagues because it's the personality of your league. I will say in my main money league, if I want to make sure that I get him, I'm probably looking at somewhere between like 60 to 70% to go get him in that league. May end up being able to snipe him in that league for about like 25. And it just depends on who in your league really needs that like upside RB2, because you're going to run out of opportunities to get those guys if they're available. So that's how I would see those guys going on in that one. And then again, like going back to like to finish this off, as we get into the season with going after getting cute and telling the story about like how those guys get you there, those vacated targets with the Texans, we kind of already knew that. Part of the reason why I didn't chase them in my main money league is because of how bad the Houston offense looked against Seattle. And I imagine it would be somewhat consistent against San Francisco. It was not. San Francisco got their own problems when it comes to that one. So like you do you. And in that more competitive league, like Troy Franklin was already picked up after last week, so couldn't go out and get him off the wire. He is still available in my high school league, if you're wondering about all that stuff. All right. Moving on to week 10 stashes that you're going to be going after for your defenses. The big one is going to be the Broncos right now. I'm just going to look at my notes real quick. The Broncos going up against the Raiders coming out of the bye last week. And then you're looking at the Ravens and the Vikes. If you're going to get a little bit cute, again, this is JJ McCarthy's going to be back in this one. If you're going to be going after that, I don't necessarily know if you're going to get like good defense from the Baltimore Ravens. You might just get bad offense when it comes to the Vikings. Colts, because the Colts are good and the Falcons are all over the place, and there's a nif button maybe when it comes to the situation that's going on with the Falcons at this point on who they're going to have and when. And the Bills and the Dolphins, again, if on that one when it comes to the Bills, and this is one of those like matchups where it says like the Dolphins could be bad on offense. It could also turn into a shootout, and you kind of need game flow to go a certain direction. So primarily if the Broncos are available, and then maybe the Colts I would be going after, because you may be able to get that in a game that they can put a little bit of pressure on the Falcons. And then after that, like the Ravens and the Vikings, obviously the Ravens, I would be going after them. Getting a little bit of cute on that one. And then you got a whole bunch of like, if you're really cute and you want to like roll the Browns or the Jets against each other because of those situations. And again, the Panthers and the Saints, it's the same thing if you want to be chasing all that stuff. And then maybe you could talk about like the Jags and the Texans, and there's some if buts and maybes to that game why I would maybe think about rolling those guys. Again, this is just based off of like how bad I saw Houston 2 weeks ago. And if it's just a one game thing where they were able to function as an offense against San Francisco, but yeah, that was like one of the worst things I've ever seen in that game going on. So anyway, that's kind of my rambling bit on the defenses I would pick up. And then if you're scheduling ahead of time to see like who you're going to be filling in for your bye weeks coming up in week 10, Bengals, Cowboys, Titans, and Chiefs. All right. Moving on to the teams one by one as we get this out of the way. So first and foremost, no news on Brock Purdy right now. This is like as of yesterday, so I don't know anything. I haven't heard anything off of Twitter or anything like that. So you're probably looking at like Mac Jones, and he's got like a knee contusion. Like I don't know what's going on with that. After that, he's gonna get like really dicey really fast on that one. I don't have a lot to say about like Christian McCaffrey having like an uncharacteristic not good day when it comes to the 49ers. Kind of needed him in one of my it says right there, rare dud, didn't even look this up. Other than the fact that like if you're getting down to the fact that like you are basically only worried about Kittle and some of the other situations with like Mac Jones and the wide receiver room, you're just getting to the point where like you could just say, hey, we're just going to take away Christian McCaffrey. And 49ers have not been particularly good rushing the football all season, if you're wondering about all that stuff. No news right now on Slick Rick. It says evaluate on Wednesday, whatever that means from a sleeper perspective. Juwan Jennings was at 85% snaps in this game, and then you get Kendrick Bourne at 79% snaps, and then George Kittle doing George Kittle things. It was a seam ball that he scored his touchdown on. It was kind of pretty. 90% snaps. All right. Bears, and this was like one of those ones that like get cute. Expect that you're going to get some type of shootout between the Bears and the Vikings, and then I'll talk a little bit about this when I get to the Ravens. But last minute, it turns out that Lamar Jackson is not going to roll, but then it wasn't a shootout anyway. The Bears just couldn't function on offense against what I would expect to be a defense that has not been particularly good. That's what we're looking at. So this is one of those offenses. It doesn't necessarily matter. They don't care about your fantasy lineup. They're just going to be inconsistent. That's how I would break them down. Running back room, DeAndre Swift. Let me scroll down here for you guys. 49% snaps, 5 red zone opportunities. He tugged on one. And then Monogane in this game, and it finished up being like 30-16 or something like that. I just have a disappointing fantasy loss to the Ravens, again, because we're expecting it to be a little bit fun when these two teams went out there. 46% snaps for Monongane, 1 red zone opportunity. I don't have a lot to say about the wide receiver room other than Zach Isaias was down to 60, or was at 60% snaps. He is knocked out with a knee. Did not get the bump because Luther Burden also got knocked out with a concussion protocol. You see that, and I think he was at like 17% snaps that I've written out right there in this one. And then I probably didn't even look up Duvernay, but he's up to 16% snaps. Now, I bring all this up because with Cole Kmet out with that back injury that he had, you do get the bump with Colston Loveland up to 81% snaps. So the if, buts, and maybes on all of this regarding what you should do with like Colston Loveland if you're going to get cute. It may not matter if Cole Kmet is back. You're probably looking at those two wide receivers because you may get that in that room where Colston Loveland ends up operating as a wide receiver 3 in the offense, and then you can roll him as a tight end. Tight ends can't break your heart. That's how I would kind of see that rolling out. You could also still roll him in this game against the Bengals. That does, we could talk about like this being one of the better uh, fantasy type friendly games that we could just say like both of the defenses are not particularly good or the offenses are good, and we can just we can get the right game script to have a lot of guys be fantasy relevant in this one. And then so that's what you're looking at is like, can you get to the point where you could say Colston Loveland is either going to be the number 3 because he's the tight end because Cole Kmet's out, or he's going to end up being like number 3 because the wide receivers are out for the Bears. So that's how I would look at that if you're going to be chasing that. That's a really nice game to be rolling out. Any Bears or any Bengals when it comes down to that coming down the line, but more so the Bengals toys than the, or excuse me, the Bears toys than the Bengals toys. All right, Bengals in this one. This is like I have surprising kind of dumb shootout loss to the Jets in this one, and we can kind of talk about like being able to predict the Jets were going to be able to score because of how bad the Bengals defense is supposed to be. But we could also talk about the fact like the Bengals should have found a way to like win the game, but like, hey, not a real football channel. So first and foremost with Joe Flacco, maybe some type of shoulder injury. That may mean that you're going to get your Drake Browning shares to come back in. That's something to be monitoring if you're going to be rolling your toys out. When it comes to the Bengals, and again, like with Jake Browning, you can get a fantasy friendly game against a bad matchup, and you could get vice versa where it's like, yeah, this is a really good matchup, and you could he could burn you. So kind of remember that. So Joe Flacco would be the guy that you kind of want if you're going to get cute out some of these guys. When it comes to the running backs with Chase Brown, because you probably put a lot of capital into him, 4 red zone opportunities went to him on the ground. He tugged. He had also a red zone target. He tugged on that too. P. Ryan had 2 red zone opportunities, but the split was 54% snaps to Chase Brown, and P. Ryan was at 42% snaps. So again, like the good stuff primarily is going to Chase Brown if you're wondering it. So it's just a matter of if it's Jake Browning, probably would downgrade Chase Brown. Maybe you could think about like, that predictive bench. If it's Joe Flacco, you're rolling Chase Brown. He's probably like pretty close at RB1 right now just because of that going on. All right. The other thing I have to talk about when it comes to the Bengals with T. Higgins, if you're wondering about all this stuff, like 88% snaps, 2 for 1 for 44 and a touchdown. And remember, like you went out and you bought your Jamar Chase because he has that like ridiculously high ceiling when it comes down there. And T. Higgins, like what you got when you bought it. So like it's matchup shopping. If you're worried about that stuff, Joe Flacco, all those things that are be going on. Joe Flacco versus Browning versus like if we get like a Joe Burrow sighting, all those things. But again, I would not be cute with some of these guys because you knew you were going to get like sub 40 grade. So like need to know how the sausage is made because he tugged on that 44 yarder, but it's always going to be that within that range of possibilities regardless of who's out there. So certain guys I would not get cute on, and other guys I would get cute on if you're looking at that. And I don't have anything on tight ends because I probably don't care. All right, Bills blew out the Panthers. I was kind of hoping for a little bit more of a shootout when it comes to these guys. Let's see, running back room like James Cook again. 44% snaps, 19 for 216 and 2 touchdowns. It was a blowout. Not really interested in the rest of the stuff when it comes to the Bills. Other than we're still kind of looking at like the future with the Bills. Jackson Haas was at 56% snaps in this game, and then equal and opposite reaction, Dalton Kincaid, 22% snaps. So again, if you were rolling your Dalton Kincaid in this game, you're expecting that the Panthers are going to put up a better script for Dalton Kincaid because you could also see if it's a blowout, Dalton Kincaid ain't going to be in the game blocking, and then you get Dawson Knox at 43% on all this. All right. Broncos are next. They blew out the Cowboys in this one. So you're looking at first like Dobbins. He was at 52% snaps this game, 3 red zone opportunities, 0 tugs. So if you're wondering about R.J. Harvey, who had 3 combined touchdowns in the blowout, he had 2 red zone carries. He tugged on one of them, 1 red zone target. He tugged on one of them. Was mixed in the game early, but only 27% snaps. Again, this was a blowout in this one, but some of it came later when the game was kind of like not as close. Talking about your Troy Franklin, if you're worried about this. So first, Marvin Mims, he gets knocked out with a concussion. So he goes from like 53% snaps to 30% snaps, which is more in line with what he was doing before. if we're wondering about that, some of these Troy Franklin opportunities may have been Marvin Mims opportunities if Marvin Mims was in the game, but Troy Franklin remains consistent at 63% snaps in this one. He did have a red zone opportunity. He tugged on that, like 8 for 6 for 69. And I didn't write down any air yards, so it probably wasn't too interesting to me on that one. And then Pat Bryant in your deeper leagues was at 56% snaps, 4 for 2 for 40, and a touchdown. It was a 24-yarder, if you're wondering about that stuff. I'm not interested in the Broncos tight ends right now, so I will move on to the Browns. So did see a little bit of chirping on Twitter about whether Dylan Gabriel will remain the quarterback coming out of the bye, and I guess he is. That's what the plan is. So if you think you're gonna get sneaky and get Sanders, like it's not looking like it's gonna happen at this point. Running back room, remember they are on bye. Some type of shoulder injury with Judkins. He gets knocked out on 33% snaps in this game. They were blown out by the Pats anyway, so he probably wouldn't have been that type of running back, as that like volume based touchdown dependent RB2. And then you get Ford was at 24% snaps in the game, and then Dylan Sampson was at 46% snaps. It's 6 for 5 for 29, and again, like kind of a blowout. So like if you are going to be speculating in a league where Dylan Sampson has been dropped at the beginning of the season, that maybe you're going to get some type of like roll based off going up against the Jets in week 10 if there is some type of significant shoulder injury to Judkins. Not a bad idea if you're like super running back dependent, or your opponent is going to be needing to roll a running back against the Jets, and just be proactive on that at that point if you're going to be wondering about that. Right now, it does maybe look like Cedric Tillman is going to come back from IR with that hamstring, and I bring this up because Bond was all the way down to 54% snaps in this game, and then Thrash, where's he at? Thrash was at 44% snaps, if you're wondering. So, like, I could definitely see that you're going to get Cedric Tillman basically phasing Isaiah Bond out of the offense when he comes back after the bye, because, like, what we kind of thought was going to happen. So, Njoku was at 59% snaps. If he doesn't get traded and they go back to that 2 tight end sets, like, that's why I would generally say, like, downgrading Bond. He did have a red zone opportunity, and he tugged on it. Fannin was at 74% snaps. He did have a red zone opportunity, and he tugged on it also. 8 for 6 for 62 and a touchdown. So maybe I would slightly value Fannin higher because of the possibility you're going to get that like Njoku trade. If not, like they're probably going to be in that like both weekly roll range, because I could imagine the offense is going to stay like 2 tight end. That kind of maybe where they're going to be heading in the future. Let's see. Buccaneers. So I got a lot to say about this from a fantasy strategy perspective. That's kind of what the channel is supposed to be about. And, I can just riff about certain things. So opening drive for the Saints, they fumble. It was returned for a touchdown. Certain teams like the Colts will just like put the pedal to the metal and blow the other team out. When it comes to the Buccaneers, they're playing the Saints, and they just did not need to do anything to win the football game because the Saints are so bad on offense. So just kind of remember, like, sometimes we can talk about like, oh, we're going to get that blowout. And then all of our toys are going to get home because they're going to blow the other team out. And then sometimes like we get the blowout, but like teams don't necessarily have to do anything to lose the football game. And that's what the Bucs generally did in this game. So if you're wondering about like why some of the guys like went the way that they did, that would be generally why. So with all this stuff, Rachaad White was out at 55% snaps. It's kind of a blowout. And Sean Tucker goes up to 34% snaps in this one. Could we predict that you're going to get a Sean Tucker touchdown in this game? Like some type of desperation RB2? Probably you could talk about that, just because like if it was going to be a blowout, he would get uptick in work with Rachaad White and then Bucky being out. And then you could also talk about the fact that like he could be a roll, because if you get that injury in that week on top of that, then he becomes a lead back. So like the strategy behind like, well, I need to roll a guy out there. Can I get him to fall in the end zone and maybe get a bigger spike out from some of these guys? Like the logic behind the story that you tell about why you roll guys, other than just, that goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning with the vacated targets with the Texans. The story that you tell yourself about how you get to where guys go, like you could have got a 40-degree day from Sean Tucker, and we could say ahead of time that like we could predict that, as opposed to like the weeks that guys pop off and you're like, well, it's non-predictive. Like this is somewhat predictive if we're really chasing some of that stuff. And then Bucky Irving stuff, like they're going to go on bye. He's supposed to be back after the bye. That's what the rumors are right now. When it comes to the wide receiver room with Ibuka, I'll just say that like got close, and that doesn't really matter from how the sausage is made in your scoring column. 99 air did have a red zone target on his 88% snaps and 9 targets. And then Tez Johnson was at 71% snaps. Did you see that he had a drop? And that's about all I got to say about those guys. Like, they just didn't need to do anything to win the game. Talk a little bit more about that when we get to the Saints, if you're interested in stuff like that. So right now with the Cardinals, Kyler Murray, I guess, is trending right there 10 hours ago, trending to play Week 9. That's going to downgrade everybody. Again, if you can predict this stuff, the Cardinals will play slow and they do not pass the football a lot. So we'll talk about the Patriots, who are passing the football a lot. So the conversation I had with my co-manager when he decided to draft Kyler Murray, because Kyler Murray is nimbly bimbly, is, well, we know better now with some of these guys. They got to throw the football a lot. They got to be like the number one option in their offense, and like they got to get like design like red zone work as the quarterback, the goal line fullback. Like if you don't hit those things, not only is the quarterback not what we think he is from a fantasy perspective, oh, he's got the nimbly bimbly. The other thing to look at in all of that is that it's going to downgrade the toys, because they're not going to have as many scoring opportunities. They're going to play like methodical and be in a lot of football games, but you're not going to win anything when it comes down to that. So the other thing that I was seeing guys talk about in fantasy football land is Zonovan Knight. Go out and pick him up against the Cowboys. Cowboys do look really good. Remember, like, are you going to get cute in the right direction? Can you predict that ahead of time? How interested are you in rolling Zonovan Knight in that matchup versus like, are you going to be blocking him from your opponent if he's available on your wire? The other thing is, and there's a couple things. So like the Ernest Johnson was, it says right there, cut from the practice squad. So that's going to tell me that DeMercado is going to be back for Week 9 as that like trustworthy back in that role of that offense. You also got like certain strategy stuff going on with the Cardinals. So Michael Carter was released and then re-signed to the practice squad. So there you go. Like if you're going to be trying to predict, if you want to be going after Zonovan Knight and thinking you're going to get something when it comes to the Cowboys, they're going to slow the game down. It's going to be ugly. I don't know how much design receiving work you're going to get. I don't know how much red zone opportunity you're going to get with the running back situation. Probably more interested in blocking than I'm going to be rolling him out there, as opposed to some of the other guys. Maybe I can predict on that stuff going on. And also, like, I hate to break this to you guys if you're the Trey McBride owner. Yeah, it might be a good time to sell high at this point when it comes out. All right, Chargers. Never trust Thursday Night Football in this one. So we'll talk about Hassan Haskins. He was out with a hamstring. We'll talk about that first and foremost, and then we get Jarrett Patterson coming in 21% snaps in this blowout. And then Kamini Vidal, 74% snaps, 23 for 117, a touchdown, 2 for 1 for 10 in the blowout. And let's see, 5 red zone opportunities went to him. Pretty good stretch of games between Tennessee, the Steelers, and Jacksonville going up before the bye. And I bring this up because that is the date that we're expecting Hampton to be back, is after the bye. So like you're going to get maybe 3 more weeks of 70% Kamini Vidal with the red zone in a good offense. That's how I would look at all that stuff when it comes down to that. The other thing is, in my main money league that I lost, the guy that I lost to rolled Quentin Johnson. Again, I'm not saying that was a bad move when it comes down to that, but because of how the offense is going to be designed with like Keenan Allen and McConkey and Quentin Johnson and then Gaston at this point, like someone's going to be the odd man out on any given week. Just kind of remember that if you're going to be matchup shopping, and it already was probably not maybe the offense that I would be going up against, to be wanting to get cute with some of the other toys in the offense to be going after that. So like not necessarily a bad guy, but like you're flirting with a zero with pretty much everybody in the offense. I would talk about. So Keenan Allen in the blow up down to 25% snaps, and then you're also going to get Trey Harris up to 59% snaps, and he did have a red zone tug in the game. Tight ends. And I had to explain this to my co-manager because we did win the bid on Gadsden in that league. 77% snaps, 5 for 5 for 77, and a touchdown. Red zone opportunity that he had. There are also going to be like sub 40-degree days, but he's a tight end, so that doesn't really matter. But that's going to happen if he's the odd man out in the offense when it comes out. So probably still the most valuable guy is going to be Ladd, especially if they're going to be yanking your Keenan Allen at like 25% snaps to say, hey, thanks, we don't need you today. If the game flow goes the right direction. All right, Chiefs. Let's see. Talk about this. So this is one of the ones that as soon as we get the downgrade of Jaden Daniels being out of the offense, we could probably talk about like the game not necessarily leaning in the direction that we necessarily want from a fantasy perspective. They just generally leaned on the Redskins offense, and that's how they won in this one. Running back room first and foremost, like Isaiah Pacheco, MCL, whatever week to week means at that point. 58% snaps in this one. He did have 2 red zone opportunities. Kareem Hunt, 32% snaps. He had 2 red zone carries. He tugged on one red zone target. He tugged on one. Probably the guy that I would want would be Kareem Hunt. And here are your butts to all of this when you're if you listen to this before waivers and you're gonna be putting your bids on. If you're gonna be doing it like after waivers, probably the way to be doing it because you're gonna get a certain amount of red zone opportunities. Going to go to Brashad Smith in this one. Only 13% snaps, 1 red zone. Yeah, he's going to score touchdowns now. He's going to have there's going to be opportunities to go someplace. He's going to get some of it. But, and this is the main but behind uh, what I probably would be doing if you're going to get some time missed when it comes to Pacheco. They did go out and get Elijah Mitchell. He's been sitting there inactive. This would be a really interesting week to just roll out Elijah Mitchell and have him absorb the entirety of the Isaiah Pacheco role in the offense, like 50-60% snaps in that offense. And then you're probably still going to get like the certain amount of red zone work going to Kareem Hunt. And then you may not even get the uptick when it comes to Brashard Smith. That's how I would view all that stuff. Rashee Rice, he continues to do what we thought he was going to do. 2 red zone opportunities. He tugs on one of them, 9 for 9 for 93. There you go. That's all you got to know about that one. Worthy was at 84% snaps in this game. The other red zone opportunity did go to him. If you're wondering about all that stuff, didn't have high air yards. I didn't write them down. If you're wondering about that, Hollywood Brown was down to 38% snaps. I do think he had a touchdown called back. Don't quote me on that, but down to 38% snaps in this one. That's about all I got on chasing the Chiefs at this one. So like the Colts, they're all league winners. When it comes out, I did see this one. So DJ Giddens, who we thought was the cuff to Jonathan Taylor, he was a healthy scratch. And then you got Goodson and Abdullah were the guys that were healthy in this game, and they were rolled out there. You see 19% snaps when it comes to Amir Abdullah, in the blowout of the Titans. So like, do what you will with what you do what you want with DJ Giddens when it comes to like trying to guess if he's the cuff or not. If you get like JT to go down at this point, if you want to be holding on to him. And then I will just bring up another thing like Josh Downs, 64% snaps, 3 for 3 for 39 and a touchdown. I just want pieces of the offense. They probably all should be rostered. I don't know if you're going to be able to predict all these. Like, you may talk about the Steelers and the Falcons could turn into interesting games from a fantasy perspective. The Chiefs also, the Jaguars, maybe the Seahawks, the 49ers, the Jaguars. There's enough games there that like if you're in that like desperation wide receiver 3, that like you're not going to be able to predict, between more than likely Alec Pierce and him on a week-to-week basis. I probably would know that Michael Pittman's going to have the possibility of really breaking my heart because it's going to go someplace else. But like if Josh Downs is available, yeah, I would be. All the pieces of this offense are probably the best offense in football. That's the long and short of that. So Redskins, so you get Jaden Daniels out with that hamstring. That's not surprising. Marcus Mariota would have the nimbly bimbly, but this is probably a matchup against the Chiefs. Even the Seattle Seahawks, I probably would not be chasing this offense with the wide receivers back. So your Bill shares, 57% snaps, 9 for 25, did have a target. But like what's going to hurt him if you can't predict the matchups? And this is Jeremy McNichols, 43% snaps. In the passing game, 6 for 5 for 64. There's your 40-degree day from Bill, and it went to Jeremy McNichols. So that's going to be rough if you're going to be trying to predict the matchups. So you're probably going to need Jaden Daniels and healthy wide receivers plus a bad defense to be rolling Bill out. That's how I would look at that. I would be looking at Bill at this point after this game. Scary Terry, he did leave at 47% snaps. I guess re-aggravated his quad. It says like all right there, whatever that means. The other things is Jalen Lynn was at 43% snaps, and then Luke McCaffrey keeps getting a little bit more interested. This is probably from a dynasty perspective because you got to imagine like Debo, 29, it says right there, and then Scary Terry is 30. Like down the line, like it does look like Luke McCaffrey is earning more role in the offense as the season goes on. I don't know how fantasy relevant it's going to be. Chris Moore, he was down to 43% snaps. That's why I say it's a little interesting. And then you're probably going to be also waiting on if and when Noah Brown comes back, if it's going to really matter from Luke McCaffrey. But I can imagine that you're going to get that ticked up as the season goes on. Cowboys, they're kind of blown out by the Broncos. And again, this is one of the ones that I would say, like, if you're going to be predicting the benching of the deeper guys in the league, you can talk about that. Did get Blue was at 19% snaps. If you're wondering about like chasing those deep dark guys that are out there. Ferguson only one target. The red zone opportunity went to Schoonmaker when it comes to the tight ends in this one. That's all I got to say about the Cowboys. All right. Surprise blowout by the Dolphins against the Falcons. So not the script that I was generally expecting. 30% snaps for Ollie Gordon, 10 for 46, 1 for 20 in the passing game. Did tug on that one. That was late, if you're wondering about all that stuff. Wide receiver room, there is a couple interesting things. So Malik Washington stays consistent at 62% snaps. He does get 2 red zone opportunity, or 1 red zone opportunity. I think he tugged on in this one. And it's going to be like weird PPR scammer because of his red zone usage, because that means he's going to be a little bit more valuable. If he can stay somewhat consistent, it says like right there on Sleeper, somewhat consistent. If he can stay somewhat consistent in the offense and he's going to get red zone opportunities, it kind of changes like what his value would be overall if you're going to be chasing that. And here's your but. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, 65% snaps in this game. 2 red zone opportunities went to him on his 3 targets. So there you go. And you're just guessing if maybe Baltimore, Buffalo, Washington, some of these games turn into a little bit more of shootouts. Week 16 against the Bengals might be a little bit interesting, and the Buccaneers when it comes to like chasing some of the deeper, darker guys, if we ever get there. All right, Eagles in this one. So the big news with the Eagles is going over to Barkley, and I guess like groin injury. So I did go look at how the game flow was going. Bigsby did come in on 28% snaps. He did look like he was getting opportunities before Will Shipley, who was at 14% snaps in this game. And then, well, I'll just go to Bigsby and we can talk about this. So 28% snaps, 9 for 104. It was, I believe, it was a closer game. I didn't write down what the score was. And for them, I think I wrote down for the Giants. It was like 21-13 going into the fourth, something like that. So it was kind of a closer game script when some of this was going on. But Bigsby did go in first. Did get a I did write this down. Other non-red zone running back opportunity did go to Bigsby in this game. So they do go on by. So if you're going to be chasing anybody, it would be Bigsby, but it doesn't mean that like I wouldn't be speculatively stashing Shipley at some point just to see how everything shakes out after the bye if Barkley is going to be injured or something like that, to at least get a 1 week rental. I would expect it would be Bigsby first, but you may get some type of surprise roll with Shipley, and at that point, like you're just speculating and trying to play the game on those guys. Like the cheapest amount of capital I have to put in for the most upside. That's how I would look at that. And I would still maybe expect that you would get some type of full bell cow from Shipley, probably split backfield from Bigsby if you're going to get that if with the potential Barkley injury. So AJ Brown right there, whatever realistic chance to come back after the bye. And then you're going to get the uptick with Devontae Smith if he is still the guy coming out of the bye. If you're going to be chasing pieces of offense, and I wouldn't necessarily do that, 74% snaps for Johan Dotson in this game. So that's how it would go. And then I did write down Goater is kind of a red zone vulture for the offense. He did have 2 red zone opportunities. He cashed those in for 2 touchdowns. And again, remember, like all the nonsense about statistics and saying like regression to the mean when it comes to guys that are scoring a lot of touchdowns. That's not how fantasy works. That's not how math works. If that's how teams are running their offenses and guys are getting red zone opportunities because they're attached to good offense, they can score on limited amount of red zone opportunities. Why? Because all you need is one to cast that in. If you get down there and you're at the 70-yard line and they throw you 3 chances and it's like in the stat sheet, it's going to say 3 red zone opportunities but 0 touchdowns. if you go down there on first down and you throw a target to a tight end and he scores on 1st and 7, it goes in the books as 1 red zone opportunities but 1 touchdown, and he doesn't get more red zone opportunities. So it kind of just works out funny that way if they go down there and like Tucker Kraft is the red zone opportunity guy when it comes to the Packers, and they throw it to him and he's like good at football and he scores. There doesn't necessarily need to be any regression to the mean. They're going down there and they're getting in the red zone and they're like, we're going to throw to Dallas Goedert. That's just how the offense is going to function, and that'd be interesting. You're going to get your sub 40-degree days, but they're tight ends. They can't break your heart, and that's how I would see it going on down the line at this point. Like with just it looks like they're throwing to him, especially in the red zone. All right. Falcons are up next in this one. Right here. So you get the vacated opportunities went to Kyle Pitts, 92% snaps, 9 for 9 for 59. They weren't necessarily good. The hope was maybe you're going to get a little bit more consistency out of the offense with Penix being a surprise scratch. Kirk Cousins comes in. He wasn't good, and this was like not particularly good Dolphins defense. When it comes down to it, not a good day when it comes to Bijan. Those vacated targets did not go to him. He had a fumble. It was lost, and then Algier comes in late and he vultures. This is one of the things I was talking to my co-manager about when he decided that he wanted to go out and drop the bag and go out and get Bijan, and you're looking for opportunity funnels. And we already know with the Falcons, a certain amount of red zone opportunity was going to go to Tyler Algier. This was a late vulture because the game was kind of like already out of hand when it happened. It would probably give you like your 40-degree day from Bijan. But again, you already knew that guys like Algier are going to be vulturing, and he's a cuff, and that's just how it rolls. So on any given week, you can get a tug from Algier just because, again, how they use him in the offense regardless of the script. All right, and then when it comes to the wide receiver room, this is a little interesting that I saw when I was like just clicking through stats. So David Sill comes in and he does 90% snaps in this game. So I was expecting that you might get that 1-to-1 replacement with Cardell Hodge. He was only at 66% snaps, 8 targets. And then if something, there's no real news on the hip right now with Drake London. That's how I would see the offense shaking out. So definitely upgrade to Kyle Pitts on that one. All right. Giants right here. So first and foremost, Jackson Dart, he does get that late red zone vulture of a touchdown to basically give you your quarterback addition of a 40-degree day, which is about like 20 points in my book is about what you want to be getting from your quarterback to be viable. Let's see, running back room. You're looking at Cam Scatterbo. Like if you haven't already heard, he goes on IR, dislocated ankle. Equal and opposite reaction. We'll talk about Devin Singletary, 15% snaps in this one. He may get goal line work in this offense because he's the trustworthy guy. He's also may end up getting the 2-minute stuff, which is going to lower the overall ceiling of Tracy. But Tracy was already working in before the injury, like consistent 32% snap, 36% snaps in this one, and got the non-Scatterboo red zone opportunity when it comes to Tyrone Tracy. I don't know how much I really want to be chasing more pieces of the Giants offense, but he's probably the second guy behind Dart about who they're going to give opportunities to when it comes to like how good the rest of the guys are going to be. Deontay Johnson, he did visit with the Giants. If you're kind of interested in that would be somewhat interesting if he does sign there down the line, and I can't really pull him up because he's not signed with anybody. So but just trust me on that one, bro. Let's see. And then the other thing that this is not redraft related. So Daniel Bellinger has a neck injury, and we all know how necks function in real football. So that means that we're probably not going to get him. We may end up getting like Thomas Fedoni, whatever, camp hype guy. That gets a little interesting. Probably not really relevant because we already probably know that Theo Johnson is the guy. And you see like 98% snaps, 4 for 3 for 20. Did not see any red zone when I was chasing all that stuff. Jags were on bye to start off with them. So not any injury news when it comes to Brian Thomas, I guess. And it says right there, like not expected to trade, but there are Twitter rumors that like teams have been calling about Brian Thomas. I don't know if I trust that, but I'll just start off with that. Now, other wide receiver stuff, I would expect that you're going to get a bump with Parker Washington. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes over the Diami Brown role in the offense. And then with all this stuff, that's about all I got when it comes to the Jaguars. I'm just looking at my notes. I don't see anything else. All right. Jets, and this was I have a surprise shootout with the Bengals. Not really a surprise because the Bengals offense or defense is that bad when it comes down to that. And then again, why guys like Justin Fields should not be on your wire, because I don't want to see Justin Fields. I don't care what about the matchup, because he can put one of these weeks up. He can also do the other thing. So like it's going to be like good Justin Fields or bad Justin Fields when it comes from a fantasy football perspective. But again, the Bengals are pretty bad defense. Brees Hall only 56% snaps in this game. 5 red zone opportunities. He tugged on one. This is a carry. He had 1 red zone target. He also had a red zone pass attempt that he also turned in. That's where your 31% snaps is. Going into the bye week, and then you get Isaiah Davis right there, 46% snaps, 7 for 65, 5 for 5 for 44. Again, this is kind of a shootout. 2 red zone opportunities went to him on the ground. He also had a red zone target. All right, there you go. If you're going to be chasing any of that stuff, especially speculating on whether or not Brees is going to be there coming out of the bye. And then the only other real thing I have to talk about, I didn't even look about, like Garrett Wilson not practicing Tuesday in this one, whatever that means. And then tight ends with Mason Taylor, 76% snaps, 8 for 5 for 34, and a touchdown. Remember, that came from Brees, but 5 red zone targets went to Mason Taylor. So that's nothing to shake a stick at if you're going to be like chasing after all this stuff, especially coming out of the bye. Offenses will change in a good direction usually when it comes to some of that stuff, especially with your rookies. All right, Lions were on bye. I don't have anything because about the only thing that we'll be tracking would be like Isaac Tisla, and I don't necessarily know if that's not redraft relevant. That's probably more dynasty relevant when it comes down to that. So Packers scored 21 fourth quarter points against the Steelers in this one. I'll start off with the running backs. So Josh Jacobs, 53% snaps in this one. 4 red zone opportunities. He tugged on one of them. I would just imagine that 53% snaps may be that calf related. But the interesting thing, 42% snaps when it comes to Emmanuel Wilson. He was 11 for 61, 4 for 3 for 26. Fumble not lost in this one. Those 4 red zone opportunities that Jacobs had on the ground that he tugged on. Wilson in this game had 3 red zone carries and 1 red zone target. So, yeah, not only is he a cuff, depending on what's going on with that calf, you're getting potentially into some type of desperation RB2. Like we could predict this. We can predict now that if Josh Jacobs is going to miss any time, or if he's going to lose out on opportunities because of the calf, that you could get this from Emmanuel Wilson. It's just mostly going to be red zone or matchup shopping. I could see Carolina, him getting a lot of run because that's a predicted blowout. And then Philadelphia, that's going to be an uglier type script, but there could be scoring that goes on in that game because of those offenses. All right. Now what we're all here for when it comes for the Packers. All right, so first we're going to go down. We're going to talk about like Christian Watson at 56% snaps, 4 for 4 for 85 in this one, 73 air. And then we got to go back up and we're going to look at Dobbs in the offense at 80% snaps, 6 for 3 for 44. He did have 66 air, no red zone opportunities that I wrote down for any of these guys. And then when teams like you and you do what you're supposed to do, Malik Heath, 33% snaps. So this becomes important when we're talking about like your good friend Matthew Golden, and then Savion Williams was up to 19% snaps, 1 for 1 for 8, and he tugged on that in the red zone. I want to make sure I got all these guys. And then now we can talk about like Matthew Golden. Are you ever going to get a spike week? Yeah, probably you still may have the opportunity that he's going to be the guy. Remember, like with the Chargers offense, there's always going to be a guy who's the odd man out. There may be in Matthew Golden week. I'm not going to be able to predict it. More than likely, outside of maybe this Baltimore and Chicago run, this 4-game sample, like he may get the stuff. Only 2 air yards at this point. So like roles within the offense with Christian Watson coming back, I imagine that his snap share is going to go up. He's going to be the air yards guy, which means that on certain weeks, like you're going to have to get a certain amount of like design stuff. Like the opportunity funnel that maybe we could have told ourselves about when it comes to Matthew Golden at this point, I probably will be dropping him this week. If you're wondering about all that stuff, what you would be doing, because, and this is like the big because of all this, Tucker Kraft is the guy in the offense. And I was listening to one of the podcasts where they're talking about like he's the guy that defensive coordinators scheme against. There you got to know. And it says like is overall tight end 1 in fantasy points through 8 weeks. Yeah, that's how it goes. 9 for 7 for 143, 2 touchdowns. One of them was a red zone opportunity. 3 overall red zone opportunities in this game. If he's the red zone guy from Dobbs, and he's the guy that they're funneling the offense through, and teams are trying to take him away. Yeah, there you go. If you're wondering about all that stuff. All right, Panthers were blown out against the Bills. So take some of this with a grain of salt. So first, Andy Dalton is not an upgrade to the offense, as was per hoped. And then Bryce Young, maybe, maybe not. Who cares with that ankle at this point? Now, Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle, they were still flopping series or drives at this point. Rico Dowdle had one red zone opportunity. It just wasn't his time when Chuba Hubbard fell in the end zone. So like there you go. If you're going to be chasing those guys in the offense, and then at this point, like all you're really looking at is trying to get lucky that they are borderling late in games. So Tet, he does 93% snaps, 10 for 7 for 99, 2 red zone opportunities on top of that. And then Leggett had a red zone opportunity at his 89% snaps, and then Coker coming off that quad up to 66% snaps. That's about all I would really care about them, is that they are going to be throwing a lot, probably not going to be efficient when they do it. And then, Tet is going to be a little interesting, and that's about all I would say about like wanting to chase any of the toys. Tight ends, Sanders at 54% snaps, Tremble was at 46% snaps, and Mitchell Evans was at 24% snaps, and I probably don't care. All right. Patriots here. So I did see that like the Patriots are like the highest expected pass rate teams, which means they're putting the football in Drake May's hand. That's why, again, he's going to be a league winner, because they're giving him the opportunity to score fantasy points. There you go. And then if he has the ball in his hand, either because he's Josh Allen and he has opportunity to score in the red zone because they're designing plays for him. I don't know if they're designing plays for him, but I could say if they're putting the ball in his hands, he can also scramble and give you the nibbly bimbly. So that's all I got to say on him. Now, kind of blew out the Browns in this one. So Ramondre, 74% snaps, and then Travion Henderson did look better on his 21% snaps, 10 for 75, but, and here's your but, fumble lost. There you go on that one. Wide receiver usage remained relatively consistent. Diggs was only at 51% snaps, 3 red zone opportunities. He tugged on those. Boutte is going to be a weekly wide receiver 3 at this point. I would just say like they have their roles. The guy whose week it's going to be is probably going to be non-predictive, because the Patriots are going to know how they're using the guys, and we're not going to know how they're going to use those guys. So Keyshawn Boutte, 74% snaps, 5 for 3 for 75 and a touchdown. Again, like just remember that they are putting the ball in Jake May's hands, so like a wide receiver can get home on any given week. The other one that I would bring up, why this gets like really fun, is Mac Hollins at 72% snaps, 7 for 7 for 89. Yeah, they don't care about your fantasy lineup. Raiders were on bye, and this is all like speculative stuff. So I guess Tyler Lockett did sign with the Raiders. I don't really know how that would shake anything out, other than like if Jacoby Myers gets traded. That would probably be the only thing that I would talk about with him, because where Lockett would work into the offense, like your guess is going to be as good as mine, like whether it's going to be like slot. I don't know how much he's going to play on the outside. He's 33. On top of that, speculating on the wide receivers not named Jacoby Myers, maybe you're going to get that upgrade like from Jack Beck. That would be like more dynasty related stuff, to be interested in any of those things. Maybe you could talk about like the potential upgrade of Trey Tucker. I don't know how much I want to be chasing any of these offense. And supposedly Brock Bowers is still going to be back from the knee. All right, Rams, they're coming off bye too, so it makes this week really easy. And supposedly you're going to get Puka, and that's about like all there is going to be to talk about the Rams. No, I lied. So Terrace Ferguson coming out of the bye, would expect that the snaps will continue to go up. I don't know if he's going to be relevant in this offense this year, but from a dynasty standpoint, it would be something to track. Maybe we could talk about like certain weeks that we could maybe chase some of those guys in the Rams offense. Buccaneers, Lions, Atlanta. There are some weeks that we maybe could discuss the snap share for Terrence Ferguson going up and that mattering. All right, let's see. Where are we to next? The Ravens. Scrolling down on my notes. So some injury designation shenanigans when it comes to the Ravens. Surprise scratch when it comes to Lamar Jackson this week. Whether or not he's going to play this week, like your guess is going to be as good as mine. But I would lean towards that. Offense with Tyler Huntley was going to be kind of like the Lamar Jackson light version of the offense, as opposed to the Cooper Rush version of the offense. So you can talk about like getting a little bit of that 40-degree day when it comes to the Ravens. And you probably more care about like at that point, is the offense going to be able to function and sustain the toys? So Derrick Henry, yes, he falls in the end zone twice. And then don't really care about the wide receivers when it comes to the Ravens. 9 targets for Zay Flowers. Bateman, obviously he's going to get home every once in a while. That's probably all I care about that. Forgot that they have DeAndre Hopkins, only 37% snaps, which is in line with what he was doing with Lamar Jackson. Charlie Kohler, 40% snaps. He vultures the red zone opportunity. Likely and Andrews both had red zone opportunities. Mark Andrews was at 60% snaps in this game, and I believe Likely was at 58. So there you go. I thought it was 40, but I must have left that in. So there you go. All right. Saints in this one. So first and foremost, we're going to go to Tyler Show. He takes over, and now he's the starter. First drive that he was in there, he throws an interception. So, I don't necessarily know if you're going to get an upgrade when it comes to the overall toys. I don't think he is. I think he's probably a downgrade from Spencer Rattler at this point. 46% stats for Devin Steele. If you're tracking that, or Neal, if you're tracking that stuff when it comes down to that, you're still going to get like the PPR scamming with Chris Olave, 12 targets, 8 for 63. And then Rashid Shaheed was at 12 targets also in this game, 9 for 75. Fumble lost that I see there. Don't really care about the rest of the guys. Juwan Johnson, I mean, if they're just throwing because they're behind, inefficient targets, but they're still targets nonetheless. 76% snaps, 8 for 553. I don't necessarily think Tyler Show is going to upgrade the offense, so I don't probably care too much about any of that stuff going on. And then Taysom Hill was still doing Taysom Hill things also that would downgrade like everybody, because if he vultures anything, your opportunity to score touchdowns are going to be lower. Seahawks bye. Not a lot to say that I saw on them other than the fact that coming out of the bye would be maybe guessing that we might get more 2 tight end sets with Elijah Arroyo. Probably not going to be the mythical 2 fantasy relevant tight ends on one team. I don't think it's going to happen, but would be expecting to watch the snap share go up coming out of the bye. Maybe next year stuff that we were warned, because I like they're going to stick with Barner. Barner's like good at football. Even if he's not going to like light up the sky when it comes from a fantasy perspective. All right, Steelers, little bit of a shootout when it comes to the Packers game. So first, we'll just talk about like 62% snaps when it comes to Warren. And I didn't see any significant red zone usage when it comes down to these guys. If you're wondering about that, no Caleb Johnson still. Calvin Austin was at 78% snaps in this game. And the only other thing is like no comment at this point. 46% snaps in line with 58% snaps for Roman Wilson. 5 for 4 for 74 and a touchdown when it comes down to that. And then, Arthur Smith is still Arthur Smith. And like, I probably will not care about the tight ends. This may be internal stuff when it comes to Steelers, when it like comes into guessing overall usage on a week-to-week basis. So not surprising coming off this week 7, 6 for 5 for 111 and 2 touchdowns when it comes to Pat Freiermuth, down to 43% snaps. And that's all you got to know on that one. And then you get, where is he at? Jonnu Smith was at 60% snaps. He led all the tight ends, in line with what he was doing before, like week 5. And then Darnell Washington down 46% snaps from the high of 91. So there you go. Like probably not going to be able to predict any of that stuff. Yeah, they're Steelers tight ends. Maybe you're going to get a touchdown catch on any given week. All right. Texans look like a functional offense against the 49ers. So you get Nick Chubb at 44% snaps. Did have a red zone opportunity. I would have rolled Woody Marks coming off of the news with Nico of missing the game. 40% snaps, 11 for 62, 4 for 4 for 49. 2 red zone opportunities went to him on the ground. One red zone target went to him. There you go. So like probably still the guy that I want. And then you're probably kind of guessing on like matchups at that point too. Like it's going to be ugly. Split backfields. There you go. Nico out with that concussion. And we're looking at, where's it go? So Higgins right here. He led all the wide receivers at 83% snaps. Also had Christian Kirk out with a hamstring, if you're wondering. 2 red zone opportunities went to him in this game. He tugged on one of them. Let's see. Knoll was at 39% snaps, 6 for 5 for 63, which this is the interesting stuff where like low usage, high efficiency, 6 for 5 for 63. That would have been the guy that I would have rolled. Was him, expecting that you're going to get the uptick in snap share. Again, sometimes the uptick in snap share does not uptick usage because they know how they're going to use their guys. When it comes down to that, I was a little interesting to see like whether or not you're going to get the 1-to-1 replacement for Nico like they've done in the past. That's exactly what they did. 71% snaps, 6 for 5 for 69, a touchdown. That would have been nice to have if you were the Nico Nico Collins, the owner. All right, and then Braxton Berrios was at 29% snaps. I guess there may or may not be an injury on him. 5 targets that did not go to anybody else that you rolled because they don't like you. And then supposedly we're looking at getting closer to Cade Stover coming back, nearing return 6 days ago, whatever that means. So like we might get like some news that Cade Stover is going to start practicing, and he was the starter from a snap share perspective before the injury week 1. If you're wondering about it. All that stuff, probably don't care too much about chasing the tight end attached to the Texans, but you do you when it comes down to that. All right, Titans. Do like the Titans coming out of this. Going to get really interesting out of the bye. Unfortunately, I don't know how many weeks you're going to be able to matchup shop them. Maybe week 13, maybe week 17, we can get a little bit fun with the Saints or with the Titans offense in this one. So it did look, Tony Pollard started the game, and I believe most of the usage for Spears came after when they were down like 17-3 against the Colts. So see, where's he at? Did have a red zone opportunity, and then Spears comes in the game, and it's all Spears pretty much after that. And you're looking at 52% snaps, 9 for 59, and a touchdown. And that was a red zone opportunity touchdown, and then he also had a red zone target. So if I'm chasing anybody with the spike, it's going to be like Spears after this. Ridley was out with a hamstring, and it would not be surprising to me that he misses until after the bye if you're going to be chasing this. Some good stuff. Some good stuff if you're in deeper, dark leagues that you need to be chasing guys off the wire. Air Minor, 94% snaps, 111 air yards, and a red zone. It's going to happen. I just can't tell you when, right? And then you're looking at Deke or Dyke or DK or whatever. He was at 89% snaps in this game, 65 air yards, did have a red zone opportunity, 8 for 7 for 93. Yeah, maybe the Chargers game, that could get a little bit fun. So like if you're chasing these guys, it's going to land. Van Jefferson had a red zone opportunity. He was still functioning at 79% snaps, if you're wondering. Gunnar Helm had a red zone touchdown, but Chig still led everybody in the offense. Like, after trying to chase like DK or Dyke or whatever, and then Air Minor are probably not really interested in. Maybe you're going to get like some receiving work spike week from Spears if they do the floppening, or maybe after the bye, like Tony Pollard's gone or something like that. So we could talk about like all that if buts or maybes. All right, finally, the Vikings. Never trust Thursday night football. Get this out of the way. Carson Wentz goes on IR with a shoulder, making way for JJ McCarthy to come back. And then I would probably be downgrading everybody when it comes to that, especially coming out of the how poorly they looked against the Chargers. Aaron Jones, 53% snaps. I didn't write down any red zone for these guys. And Jordan Mason was down 35% snaps, again, chasing those volume-based, touchdown-dependent RB2s. I probably would not have been rolling him out against the Chargers this week, other than trying to catch a touchdown falling in the end zone. And then I didn't write down anything for the receivers because I don't care, because JJ McCarthy's coming back. In this one, yeah, there you go. So that's what I got for after waivers, and maybe next week, I don't know.